Welcome to the Vienna Whyte Roundtable, Season 1, Episode 19. I'm your host, Millie Rouge from the band Vienna Whyte. This roundtable is a Yeg Music production. Today we have three incredible male guests with me today. Cole, do you want to start off and introduce yourself to the chat?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Cole Murkowski. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, and I do some singing and songwriting stuff.
Awesome. And Matthew, can you tell us a little about your project?
Yeah, so I'm Matthew, or Rabbs3y, aka, and I make dance music, really kind of progressed into dance music, and I'm from London.
Awesome. And Kyle?
Hi, I'm Kyle Ivan. I'm from Ottawa, Canada, and I'm kind of a singer-songwriter, but I back myself with like a 5-piece indie rock band, and play a lot of cover bars and try to play the original music venues and some festivals as well.
Beautiful. That's awesome. So today we've got all of our guests on board. When I was looking through your guys' Instagrams, and just looking through kind of your musical journeys, I have a very specific theme that I think you all do, which we'll talk about for our topic of the day. But I wanted to start off with Cole. In about 2 minutes or less, can you tell us a little bit about your musical journey and kind of how you got to where you are today with your music?
Sure, yeah. So basically I grew up playing music and singing and all that, very musical family. And then kind of in high school into university, I started doing a little bit more songwriting. And towards kind of my second or third year of university, I got into recording. And so kind of where I'm at now is I'm just writing music and recording it at home this is my mic that I use to record my vocals and stuff like that. So
awesome.
Just, basically just all self done, basically.
I love it. That's amazing. And Rabbs3y, can you tell us about your journey with music and where you are with it now?
Yeah, as Cole just said, look, musical family, it seems to be a common trend, really. It gets passed down generations. But yeah, so really musical family, heavy influence from my father. So I got into guitar originally, so I was classically trained for a couple of years, and then kind of heard a lot of prog rock and blues and got heavily into that kind of stuff. And then kind of by the age of 16, 17, I decided I wanted to take it a lot more seriously. So then I kind of went to music school and progressed from there. And then was in a load of bands, like rock and roll bands, indie bands, loads of Britpop stuff, because that was still kind of heavily from the 90s. It was still super cool, basically. And then I was in bands for quite a few years, gigging, touring about, etc. But I always had a real love for kind of dance music, and all the bands that I was in, even though we did a few bits and bobs here and there, they ended up breaking up because there was too many people to look after.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I want to pursue this, and I want to keep creating music, and I want to keep enjoying what I'm doing. So ideally, I need to do it on my own, so I don't have to rely on other people. So then I got heavily into DJing, and I was kind of DJing out and about in London, and then that helped me refine kind of my palette for dance music. And then I kind of got into the sound design stuff from there, and still kind of try and put some of my rock and roll guitar musicianship influence into the kind of electronic side of things, but primarily now I kind of just focus on that. And and then I'm here.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And Kyle, a little bit about your journey as well with music.
Yeah, I didn't really have a musical family at all growing up, other than maybe some traditional Croatian instruments that were played on my dad's side. But
Nice.
it was I just kind of I guess I got into music a bit later than maybe most would. I think I went to my first concert. I was like 13 or something. It was 2008. I went to see AC/DC, and that was pretty wild for a first concert. And pretty much since then, I kind of fell in love with like the electric guitar right from there. I got my first guitar on my 13th birthday. I just spent hours in my room playing that. I just wanted to be, a Van Halen, Angus Young kind of dude for the longest time. And then somewhere along the lines, I started singing a bit. It wasn't really by choice at first. It just kind of fell together, and a band needed a vocalist. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll fill the spot. And that kind of, over the course of years and different bands. And then I went to college for music, and, there's been a lot of different projects kind of all leading to now where I am here, which is kind of, more of a more of my own solo project, but with a band. But I kind of semi hire them
For
/
hire, yeah.
semi on my team. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I do now. And it's I still play. I do it full time, but a lot of my money comes from playing the cover bars. But I tour still and play live music venues, and just got to play like a pretty major festival here in Canada recently, which was a lot of fun. So
Awesome. Well, that
Yeah.
sounds really great. You guys obviously all have some really awesome experiences with music so far. So my actual topic of the day that I want to chat about with you guys is recording at home. Now, as far as I know, you all kind of have a little setup here. Cole, you record at home. Rabbs3y, you record in your own studio. And Kyle, do you record on your own, or do you typically record in studios?
I'll typically go with a producer in studio. At home, I try to stick to just demos and stuff.
Demos, cool.
I feel like college really kind of took that out of me, is where it was almost like I wanted to record at home when I was a bit younger, and I tried to record, when I was in my high school band, I tried to record us myself on my laptop, and then I'll still record demos at home. But I feel like going to college, the more I learned about recording, the more I learned that I'm not the guy for the job.
It's difficult.
Yeah, it's
Not
like
an easy
I
thing.
can do it, but someone else can do it better, and I'd much rather pay them.
Totally. Yeah. Well, then I'll start with you, Kyle, and we'll actually talk about this.
Sure.
My first question, and then we'll kind of move towards the other two because they're a little bit more set up in their studios. So what is your preferred kind of setup when you are in a studio? What kind of ways do you have yourself set up for recording, and what kind of instruments do you typically like to record, and how do you like to record them, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, it differs a bit depending on which producer I'm working with and kind of what the project is. A lot of my professional recording experiences have come from my solo project that I've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years or so. But yeah, I mean, like I definitely, I'm the vocalist, so I record all the vocals and stuff, and then I'll typically throw down some guitar tracks where they're needed, but it often involves a lot of like the producer playing some parts if they're competent to, and often hiring session musicians to fill in the rest of the parts. But it's it's a lot of like kind of the vocalist king, at least until recently. It was a lot more of like a singer-songwriter path then, so it was kind of like vocals and then you produce around it, whereas like now I've kind of taken more of an indie rock turn where it's like the band is equally important and more of those things. So it's changing a bit now, but that's more recent, so there hasn't been as much in studio with that kind of thing, where I'd probably rather have more of a unified band in there. But yeah, so it's really just like, for me, the most important thing, like gear and equipment and setting aside, is really the producer, since it's a big collaborative role between me and them. It matters that that's not just like a job for them. They actually like care about what the project is and like what they want it to sound like, because they're going to have a big influence on kind of how it turns out in the end.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that actually ties really well into my next question. But before I jump there, I'll just chat with Rabbs3y for a minute here. You had said you also went to school for music. Can you tell us a little bit more about the school you went to and kind of what you prefer with recording? Because I know you probably did a lot of recording maybe at the school you were at, and maybe if you prefer at home recording or in studio kind of deal.
Yeah, so I went to British Academy of Music, which was obviously a really great facility, and because of that, naturally there was great gear there was good studios, and that opened the door for me to do a lot of session work with my guitar stuff, because that's kind of how I got in with my guitar ability. So I did spend a lot of time in studios kind of learning the ropes, did a lot of kind of tech work, some session work and things like that, and never got to like work as a producer on anything. So I can kind of see what Kyle was saying there about that is a massive relevance, like having someone that is on your side and shares your vision and understands what you want. And it's not just about like, the payday, it's about their project having their name against something. So I completely get that. That's awesome. But yeah, so I kind of had a lot of time in studios. And I would have to say, if I'm recording with a band or, live instruments and things to that effect, then having done stuff at home and done stuff in the studio, I would 100% have a producer like with me the whole time, having that influence, having that second set of eyes, that second set of ears to look over things and kind of guide you through that process. So if it's kind of that side of things, I would opt for a studio if it was possible. But in all honesty, with a lot of dance producers and like people that make house and things like me, is that you do wrap yourself up into one package. You become a producer with it as well. You design your own sounds, you work with your own VSTs, and you craft your identity within that music. So therefore, you kind of are doing both those things in one. So therefore, the relevance of a producer would, I guess, for the mixing and the mastering, then it's super important, because you can become really blinded to how things sound if you hear them so often. So
Yeah.
you need that, another set of ears then.
Mm-hmm.
But for the production side of things, like for me, I would want to do that in the comfort of my own home studio, which I'm here. Like, I can spend hours and hours, not on studio time, just on my own time, kind of crafting my VSTs, crafting my sound, making things like how I want. And you know, you're your own worst enemy when you make music. Like, it might be like, oh, the kick is a little bit overdriven here, or there's too much roll up on the sub, and everyone's like, no, it just sounds the same, but to you it doesn't. And
Totally.
like, having that in your own kind of home studio. So yeah, I guess to quickly summarize, it'd be like band stuff and live stuff. I would love to go to studio and kind of have that kind of producer there with me. But for the kind of electronic dance side of things, because you can do it all as one, comfort of your own home would be my favorable thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a really good point that you brought up, that I think a lot of producers and people that are almost self-producers, they get so wrapped up in their projects, and it's really hard to kind of step out of that world sometimes. And I think that can be the really nice thing of either having someone master your tracks or having that second set of ears to really be like, you know what, like, this actually sounds just fine. Like, I think you're thinking a little bit too far into this. Like, you've worked on this for so long that you're probably like, it becomes your baby, right? So you kind of really put yourself into it. So I think that's a really, really good point you made. Now, Cole, sorry, go ahead.
Of any kind, you know, whether you're painting, you're drawing, you're creating music, whatever it might be, you're always going to be an enemy, because you know obviously what you're capable of, but you also have that ideology in your mind of how you want it to sound exactly, which no one else will know. Only you know yourself. And
yeah,
be a bit like, you know.
Yeah, it can be frustrating at times when I've had to change producers in the past because of working with them, and I know their engineering skills are better than mine, but sometimes they're just not getting the message or the vision right, and
absolutely,
it can be very conflicting at times like that, where it's like, I know the way you're doing it is not the way I want it to sound, but I'm struggling to tell you how to make it sound that way.
I think that's a really hard part, is to explain in your brain what you're hearing through like instruments. And I think that's one of the most difficult parts. If you're a producer and you have really good chemistry, usually you can avoid that. But if you're kind of struggling, you have some hiccups, it can be really, really tough to explain that. Now, Cole, I know you do a lot of again, self kind of production at home.
Yep.
Do you typically send off your tracks for mastering, or do you do that process all throughout yourself?
Yeah, so typically what I'll do is, I mean, I basically, up until this point, I've never had the funds to kind of do any of my, like, do anything, give it to anybody else. And so I was like, well, I'll just spend the time and probably do it wrong, half a dozen times and then get it right. And I'd rather just spend my time on that. But for my process, usually it's I'll record it using the instruments that I have at home, kind of on my home setup, do the mixing and the production elements sort of as one step, just to make it sound good. Just gonna get what I'm hearing. And then usually I'll use, again, don't have a ton of funds, so I'll usually use like an online mastering service or something like that. And usually I'm pretty happy with the results. I mean, maybe in the future, if I had a little bit more money or time, I could kind of get into that a little bit more. But basically where I'm at, is like, you know what? It sounds good enough. It sounds like what I want it to sound. So why would I pay money or spend extra time really, sweating the small stuff, I guess.
Yeah, especially when you're in the learning process, I think it's really cool. I know when I first started out, I tried to do like my own garage band. Oh man. And it was like, it was decent, but it's just like, it's a little bit cringy when you look back. You're kind of like, ooh, probably should have, but it totally makes sense, right? You're learning. That's the way you learn. You kind of build your way there. So Cole, can you tell us kind of what your recording studio setup looks like at home?
Yeah. So typically what I'll do is, or what I have right now is I have, right beside me over here, you can't see it, but I got my bass guitar, my electric guitar, and my acoustic guitar. And I have this microphone, and I have a couple, like, these studio monitors and a couple other things, like small little things. And I basically just record straight into my laptop and use a heck of a lot of VSTs. So for the piano parts and stuff, for example, usually what I'll do is I'll rent a piano from Long and McQuaid for a week for $50 or whatever it is. And my cousin plays piano really well, or my sister, and I'll get them to play the piano part, and they'll do it for free.
That's awesome.
And then for drums, I'll like get an electronic drum kit in and plug it in, and again do it all with VSTs, and so kind of you still get that kind of natural kind of timing and stuff like that. But you also it's a lot more easy to control after the fact, where I don't want to have to bring them in again to re-record this part if it didn't come out quite right. With the guitars, because it's mainly me playing that, I can, if I hate how it sounds, I can go back and re-record it because it's just my time. Yeah. So usually, it's pretty small, pretty simple, but that's kind of the way I like it, and try to keep it as low cost as possible is my big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the hugest things with studios I think, because I've done in comparison to the at-home recording and the actual in-studio. And the most stressful thing is when you are paying per hour and you're worrying about, okay, I really hope this guitarist can learn this part and they don't mess it up, because if they take way more time, I'm spending this much more money. So totally, like you said, like it's nice to have the ability to kind of have either like a friend or family, which you're really lucky to have, or just yourself, right? So that you can really just work off of that and not have to worry about that cost. Because I know that's the most expensive part, I feel like, when you're in the studio. So it's kind of a blessing to find a producer who will just charge you a lump sum and be like, that's the amount. I won't charge you for whatever. It's just the amount. That's like a very good thing to find. Now, my next question for you guys, do you think when an artist records at home compared to in a studio, it adds less value to the song compared to like a professionally mixed and mastered track? Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just asking your opinion on what you think. Rabbs3y, did you want to start this one off?
Sure. Okay. So that is a very good question. I'm just going to be very blunt and say no. I think that, in all honesty, dependent on genre, having that producer there can have a massive, impact on the quality of that song. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the musicianship and that individual vision and how they bring that across. Like if you're doing it at home, some of like the craziest records that we've heard of like the last decade have been recorded in a cupboard. Like it's about bringing out what you want, bar environment. Like, one of the first songs that I recorded, I got like a really nice mic for my birthday. And for whatever reason, I couldn't get it to work. So I just stuck in a short SM58 and sung on it. And it was the best recording I've ever done. And I thought, I've just spent, however many £100 on a mic, and I can just do it on a your standard SM58. So I personally think that having other sets of ears and having other people around you can really help bring out extra creativity, can really help you perform as best as you can and help bring a vision out. But in regards to environment, I don't always feel that has a massive impact on things. Look, I mean, I can't deny it. When I used to record with my band, we'd have studio time and we'd go some really good places and work with really awesome, talented people, and they made the record sound as good as it did. I can't sit here and deny that. And I can't say that if I did it in my home studio here that I'd get it to sound as good. But I think of the back of that is that when you are doing it at home, we talked about time pressures, and like I talked about wanting to refine things to an absolute millimeter. I guess you do have that benefit. And I think sometimes when I've recorded stuff at home that I've taken away from the studio, I've done a better job because I'm relaxed. I'm not stressed about this, that, and I know I've got the time. So it is a little bit of a weird question, because in some ways you could be like, yes, in some ways you could say no, but I'm just going to kind of stick to my gut and just be like, no, like, yes, because you could bring an amazing producer into your home and they could like help you craft something epic inside your room. And so I don't know if I really answered that very well, to be honest. I kind of contradicted myself a little bit, but
I totally get what you mean. Kyle, what do you think kind of around this topic? Do you think it adds less value, or do you think it's pretty much the same?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely agree a lot with what Rabbs3y said there. But there's kind of, I guess there's kind of like a threshold, and I'm talking more about it's not about where you record, like not at home versus a studio, because I mean, the building makes no difference and the equipment can be bought by anybody. But I guess the difference is more an independent musician versus a recording engineer if the independent musician doesn't have a certain knowledge of engineering, I think always it's almost always going to be better in the studio with the professional engineer, because they just don't have enough knowledge to do things properly. They're going to, either they're going to throw it on with no mixing and it's going to sound, super bare, or they're going to over compress things and over EQ things and it's just going to sound really crappy. So I think it's just a threshold in my opinion. But once you have enough knowledge to kind of be able to make a radio level mix, which is a great number of people, I think at that point, then it's, then it's kind of, it could go either way, studio or at home. I don't think there's much of a difference. And, closer to what you were saying, there actually is probably more of a benefit at home if you have the skills, because then you're able to craft it on your own time with as much flexibility as you want. And you can really fine tune it the way you're picturing it and don't always have to have a communication barrier with someone else. And like you said, you could bring other people into the room too if you want, to your own house. But for me, it's that threshold, because I think that's a common mistake I'll see, like in Ottawa here, I'm involved in a music community where I'd say the majority of the music community is, very entry-level musicians, and they don't know a lot of the backside of the music industry and how things work. They just think, oh, you write a song, you get a band, you play tight, and then you get lucky. They don't know how everything works. So a lot of them will be like, oh, well, Billie Eilish recorded a hit #1 song at home, so I'm going to go record it at home. It's like, yeah, but you have done no education on this, and you're about to use GarageBand or a torrent of Logic, and you don't even know how to use half the plugins that are on there. So no, sorry, you're not going to be able to do that with that knowledge. But in time, with education and skill and experience, of course, you can do it at home then.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, because a lot of artists and celebrities, some of them have made the worst recordings, but they just do really, really well, because it's more about the craft of what they're putting out than compared to like the quality. And if that makes sense, like some artists can throw that off really well, if that makes sense. But I also find like, it also seems like it's almost a stereotype to kind of in the music industry. Sometimes I think people are like, oh, well, if you go to the best recorder, the best producer, everything like that, like your song will be amazing. But at the end of the day, it does come down to what the artist is putting out, not necessarily the production level. Like, of course, yes, that's going to help. But that's also not going to sell you a million copies. It really depends on like your marketing and your advertising, which is obvious. But I think that can also play a huge part into that people kind of almost forget about, right? So
yeah, and I don't think it's obvious to everyone too. It seems obvious as we talk about it here, but a lot of people forget about that all the time. I think myself included, you'll get caught up in the music and I'll be like, it's like, okay, I'm investing in all this, but I'm forgetting that I don't have a built up brand yet to sell, enough merchandise or whatever, ticket sales.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually talked about yesterday on our last roundtable chat all about marketing. So there's so many levels to it that you really have to consider. So it's a journey for sure. Yeah. Now, Cole, I'm curious to know kind of what you think, because you are really all through your studio. Do you find that do you ever think that if you went to maybe like a producer, do you think your tracks would have that next level, or do you think it's really just about building up your craft and getting the experience?
So I think it's a little bit of both. I think especially in this day and age, it is very possible to record a #1 album with the best production value at home. It like in ways that it wasn't before, because you can do everything with software and VSTs on a laptop, with a copy of Pro Tools, right? You can do that. I think, but I do think there is some value in studio time and kind of doing it there, because a studio is meant specifically for that, right?
Yeah.
Like I know, for example, on some of my recordings, I record them at home, and the take of my vocals that I like the best, if you solo them, you can hear like a little piano playing in the background from upstairs from when someone else was playing piano, right? And that's kind of the stuff that you wouldn't ever see. And so if you're trying to get like absolute perfection, I think, studio is great for that. They have the best equipment, they have the best facilities, they have the best kind of, having a producer there can really hone it. But I also think that for a lot of intents and purposes, especially like if you're just starting out, or even if you're not looking to make, to be #1 in Canada or the US, if you're looking to record something, you can get that level of quality quite easily, or not easily, but it's possible to do it at home in ways that it wasn't before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, so I'm curious to know, what are maybe some things that you guys are still learning about with recording? This could either be in studio or at home, that you're kind of trying to develop more of or work on more with your craft. Rabbs3y, do you want to start this off? Because you have quite a bit of experience with mixing and making your own tracks. So what are some things that maybe you're kind of working on to develop your craft or your art, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, look, as a musician, I think everyone that is a musician in any way, shape, or form is always evolving. So whether that your musical taste is evolving and therefore your influence and the way in which you output your music is changing.
Right.
So that is obviously constantly an evolving thing. And then off the back of that evolution, naturally new skills need to be obtained to ensure you can portray that new vibe or that new thing you want to give in the best possible way. I think for me individually, a big thing for me is that I was always really, really heavily into creating and producing music. So working on the sound design side of things. When I was at kind of like college stage in music school, I had like a little side job where I'd go work in the studio and do session work and things like that. So I was kind of in that world, but I never really was able to get my hands on the mixing and then mastering side of things. So I'm confident in like my musicianship and my ability to put together a song. And it's not always going to be the best song in the world, but I know that I can do it. So yes, if my influences change, my output will change, but really and truly my focus is on actually that post-production. And that kind of comes back to what we were saying about doing things in the studio, doing things at home. Like that ability, like Cole said about having, there's a lot more possibility. Now the option is there to do things at home if you've got the time and you have some knowledge around it. And ultimately, of course, that can be done in a studio as well. Refining my ability to mix and master music to a high standard. I guess I was kind of brought up in an environment where you don't, if you've mixed a track, you must give it to someone else to master, because it's, you know, it's having that kind of a third opinion, another set of ears, and you know, picking out mistakes, because you can become numb and blind to things, like especially if you're recording a song, you're doing a vocal take, you've done like 3-4 hours and you don't even know whether it sounds good or not anymore.
Yeah.
But so I think like that kind of mixing and mastering is a big thing for me, and kind of learning that, and that's a constant evolving thing, and I'm trying to be really controlled in regards to what I do, and I think sometimes as a producer, especially like with electronic music, you get carried away with all these plugins and all these amazing new things that can do 10 things that the last thing you had last year can't. But actually just kind of like learning the basics and the rules, and actually being able to like kind of, you know, craft your mix and getting it to sound as you want. And I think actually for like an electronic music producer, it's a lot more common to do your own mixing, because you know, you're doing everything electronically anyway, and you kind of mix as you go and balance things out and make things sound as good. But if you're like, you're kind of in that environment, but like kind of having that level of skill is something that I definitely need to improve on. I definitely need to get better on. I've actually only just started mixing my own music. So the first few songs which I released sort of like 2018, 2019 were all mixed and then mastered by 2 separate individuals. But now everything that I'm putting out myself is mixed and mastered myself as well. So it's kind of like a big thing for me to feel like I've got to that standard where I feel confident enough in my own ability to do that. But I can't sit here and say that I'm anywhere near as good as mixing and mastering as I am at making music in the first place. Yeah. So for me, yeah, that's my focus, and that is a constant thing for me, just that's to kind of get back to that side.
Yeah, it's definitely a learning process, and I think you'll do great in it no matter what. Now, Kyle, I know you kind of have switched. You said you switched to kind of more of that indie style now. So what kind of things are maybe you and your band working towards? This could be in the studio wise, or just musically, like working towards kind of more improving on.
Yeah, so it's a lot of it too is still at this point is kind of just more me working with musicians I choose to, because even the band I play with now, like members kind of come and go because as they're kind of higher and as they're available. Even though I ideally would love to have a you know, kind of a permanent band ready to go. That's kind of still just in the molding stages.
Process, yeah.
But yeah, like I mean, there's a lot more. I guess in terms of like recording. There's a lot more that I'll do at home now. That's I guess I'll try to, like, even though I'm still kind of going to the studio to record my songs, there's a lot more effort I'm putting into recording demos. Like I'll spend a lot more time on Logic and try to fully craft a demo, you know, and like add in all the, you know, virtual instruments that I can where I picture them. So that way it's just kind of communicated more easily with the producer by the time I get there, which I notice has been a big help in the last couple singles that I've released. You know, I've made sure to record as many guitar parts as I can, bass parts, throw in any other sounds that I can find. You know, Logic's great for that because it comes with a library of sounds at your disposal right off the bat. So even if things are going to change a bit down the road, at least I have an actual audible, you know, description of what I want the song to, the direction I want the song to be in. So a lot, so I guess in terms of like what I'm doing at home, you know, I've just kind of got, you know, just like a 2-channel interface, Focusrite interface, and, you know, just a MacBook Pro. And I've got, I've got a pretty nice Audio Technica mic here that I probably too nice that I need for demos at home. Like you said, 58 even can work sometimes, but, you know, and I mostly just have guitars at home and everything else would be programmed. But yeah, so I guess just developing that in terms of recording is the most I work on. But I guess, you know, that's still not my main craft. And I kind of decided that, you know, about 5 years ago. And there was a time where I actually thought I might want to be an engineer or a manager. And I tried recording a band once in studio and it went pretty horribly. But it's
so
okay.
That was kind of like the steering you away from that direction. You're like, no more will I do this.
A little bit. And I think I just realized that like it wasn't where my passion was. I wanted to be on stage performing and not in the studio recording. You know, I'm much more of a stage junkie and adrenaline, you know, control the crowd kind of guy. And so like a lot of my craft, especially lately, has surrounded songwriting, because I just believe that, you know, a lot of it comes from, you know, writing a really great song. And, you know, you can do a really great recording of a song, you can have it the way you want it to sound like, and you can work with the best producers and you can have a great marketing plan. But if it's not a song that someone turns on and has no idea who you are and goes, what the hell is this? I want to listen to this again. Then it just doesn't matter. So.
Exactly. That's a really good point. I really love that. And Cole, now I'm curious to know what things you're kind of working on towards in your self-recording at home and kind of some ways you're trying to grow.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is, I mean, so when I did my first EP in February 2018, I think it was, I had no idea what I was doing. And I basically just like put together a couple songs that I wrote and made it sound okay. And I released it on Spotify and it was absolutely terrible. And I still hate that album. But kind of in the time since then, it's kind of been gaining the skills and kind of like, you know, working on some like little things, some little mixes, things like that, just to kind of build up a bit of a repertoire of tools and kind of skills that I can use to mix and master it and make it sound as good as I can. Now, the thing that I've found with that is that often I will go into the recording studio and to my DAW and I'll want to use every single one of those tools that I have in every song. And so the big thing that I'm learning now is learning how to use these tools and techniques to serve the song primarily. An example would be for my cousin, she wanted to record a cover of a song. It's a very like simple, like piano, a little bit of guitar, very gentle kind of song. And the main thing is the vocal performance, right? And I went in there and I was like, okay, I'm going to make this, you know, this big production and, you know, have, you know, all my compression and EQ really, really tight. And then I realized I took a listen to it and it's like, this sounds all right. And then I actually just turned off all my like VSTs and stuff like that. And I actually liked how it sounded a little bit better, just because it was much more natural. And that's what served the song, is not have heavily processed stuff, right? So I think that's what I'm kind of like still trying to figure out is, okay, I have all these tools that I can use, but what can I do to make the song that I'm recording? What can I do to make that sound the best? Totally.
Yeah, I really love that. That's really interesting that you had that experience of having this full production song and then just stripping it down and being like, oh, this is actually better than what I had originally. Yeah. It's a really interesting experience when that kind of happens. And I know myself when I've recorded in studios and I had this idea and it kind of comes back and I'm like, okay, that is not what I wanted at all. So it's interesting to kind of strip back, take some instruments away, and how it completely just changes the song. So that's really interesting. That's actually all the time we have for today, guys. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. My name is Millie Rouge. I'm a part of Vienna Whyte from here in Edmonton, Alberta. Before we head off, I'm going to get all of these gentlemen to tell you their names again and tell you where you can find them on their social medias.
All right. Yeah, I'm Cole Murkowski. You can find me on Instagram at Cole Murkowski, ColeMerkosky, or at colemurkowski.com.
Rabbs3y is my performance name, RABBS 3 and then Y. So search that anywhere and I'll come up, Spotify, Instagram, or all the above. And I've got a release coming out this Friday in a couple of days' time. So
awesome.
Yeah. So search the name and let me know what you think.
Once again, I'm Kyle Ivan from Ottawa, Canada, and you can basically just find most of my stuff from kyleivan.com, or you can just look up at the Kyle Ivan on Facebook or Instagram, or probably even TikTok.
Oh, you have TikTok. Awesome. I will follow you. Awesome. All right. Have a great day, guys. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Sue.
Thanks.